I think we are live. Yes, we are. Welcome everyone. Welcome to our Conexões UBC panel. We have a very special one today. We will be talking about the project Credits Due, about credits and identifiers in general, and we have some
identificadores de forma geral, e temos ótimos convidados aqui para falar.
Well, my name is Peter. I'm International Relations at UBC. I'll be the moderator today, and I will introduce. I actually like each of one of you to introduce themselves. I'll start with Graham. Davis, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. My name's Graham Davis. I'm the CEO of the Ivers Academy, which is an organization based in the UK, and we represent songwriters and composers, and we're most well known for awards that we give, the Ivor Novello Awards for songwriting and composition. But we've also been spearheading a campaign called Credits Due, which we're going to talk about today. And I'm absolutely delighted. Thank you to Peter, to UBC, to Ugi Bibi, and everyone that's joined this call. It's really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. It is, I think, the first step in that collaboration between Credits Due and UBC, and there'll be more to come. But today we want to introduce it. Mugi, hi, how you doing?
How are you?
Could you please tell us who you are? I think a lot of us already know, but for those that don't, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. First of all, thanks so much for inviting me. My name is Mugi Canazio. I'm a record producer engineer. I'm also a drummer, and I was the best drummer in my building. It was not a big building, but So I live off of music and for music for as long as I can remember. And it's always a pleasure to contribute to any hopefully valuable information that I could share.
Espero que seja valiosa como experiência. Sim, eu vejo que você tem uns prêmios muito legais ali atrás de você.
Yeah, well, and a lot of miles too, a lot of nights not sleeping. But I'm proud of it each hour. It's been an extraordinary journey for me. It's still going. And
amazing.
I'm a junkie of arts, And
amazing.
And what a
Thank
privilege.
You so much for joining us today, man.
Yes, you're very welcome.
It's a pleasure and an honor. And Bibi, you are a songwriter, an artist. You've worked in you've done everything really. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, I did not. There's a lot yet. Thank you so much for having me, for having us. I'm honored to be here. Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Well, I'm a songwriter, also a singer, and I was always passionate about music. It was what I wanted to do ever since I was 5. I was 100% sure about it. And then I kept on writing stuff, forcing my friends to be in bands with me. Nobody wanted. But eventually, after I started studying social communications university, I had this opportunity to go for a course at Studio VIP in São Paulo, which is owned by Dudu Borges. And then after that, he invited me to work there as a songwriter. And that's where my journey actually began. And then I worked at the studio for 5 years, and I got to be a songwriter, but also an A&R, also a runner, also like doing all types of...
voltadas à indústria e à vida de estúdio. Então, eu acho que o estúdio foi ótimo ambiente para
experience at Studio VIP, and also now I just moved to LA to study and work with different people. Now I'm at this program by Stargate, and before coming here, I had done work with different types of artists, from Anita to Pedro Mariano, which are very different artists, and I'm glad to say that I got to work with people all around this sphere. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I will start with Graham now, because I would like you to give us and the audience a bit of an introduction and overview of what Credits Due is and what it wants to achieve, and why this partnership with UBC.
Absolutely. So the credits due vision or purpose, and it's very much a campaign. It's something that we want everyone to participate in and benefit from, is ensuring that the recordings carry complete and accurate data on who contributed to the recordings. And this is not a new objective. I think in a way, if it was to cast us back a little bit to when we were in physical product with vinyl and CDs, and obviously we still have vinyl, but when it was mainly vinyl and CDs, etc., there was a pretty good process then for the people distributing that product to gather in the information on who wrote the music, that complete information on the credits, and
Sorry, Graham, you're breaking up a little bit. Maybe if you took the video out.
Was really
He's breaking up bad. Well, I guess I will take over a little bit from Graham. So as he was saying, I think the main objective of this initiative is to bring consciousness to the composers, and actually to everyone in the chain, the importance of having everyone identified from the beginning. I think many composers are aware, of, like, in Brazil, there is legislation that says that credits need to be always informed for a song whenever it is used. That includes radio, for instance, and we know that in practice that doesn't necessarily happen. Sorry, Graham, I took over a little bit because you were dropping out. You're back.
Thank you for taking over, and apologies for the call
no
dropping
problem.
out.
Maybe
So
if you cut the video, it'll work better. If you use only
shall
audio.
I do that?
Okay, cool.
So the start point, this is not a new challenge, but in the past, when we were releasing physical products, it was more common for the person releasing that to get the information on who wrote the song, who the producer was, all the information on the credits. But what we find in streaming is that process has unfortunately left, we feel, particularly the songwriters and the producers behind. So many recordings now are hitting the streaming platforms with actually no information relating to the song on them at that point. And that's a big problem, as well as an opportunity, because the consumer would like to search on Mugi, on BB, and other people that are the underlying songwriters, but they can't get to that information. So from a consumer perspective, and the digital service providers, they really want this information. But obviously, the collecting societies and all of the organizations that have to process this information, and Peter knows I used to work at PRS for many years, which is the UK equivalent of UBC. The task of matching the usage with the recordings is a huge task. It's very costly, and if that information isn't there when the recording is uploaded to the streaming platform, it creates such a waste of effort, a waste of money, and it can mean that the songwriters don't get paid, and they may not get paid for many months or even years. So we would like, with Credits Due, to raise awareness of the importance of this information and how we get the information onto the recording at the earliest point in the creative process. That's what
Right.
credit stew is about. We think we can do that, and we can go into it in more detail as to what information we need to capture and how, but that's the objective. It's to get songs properly credited.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I want to know from BB actually. Well, let's start with BB. Because you've worked with so many different artists, you're a composer yourself, and you have been through a long time in that environment in the studio, right? One aspect of what Graham was saying is there are technical issues that we can see for the spreading out of this information, right? This is one part of the thing. But I think one important aspect of this is that who has the knowledge, who is, about who is actually participating, be it in a composition or a recording, that is happening very far away from UBC, for example, or from the record label. It's happening in the studio, right? Most of the time, people are composing. Sometimes you're doing something and another person comes in and they contribute something. There it is. They are a composer as well on that song. And rarely does that information get collected there. Would you agree that that's the case? Have you had this kind of issue or problem where you had to not, after the fact, you had to run after that information?
Well, I guess mainly, the reason that this happens is because we don't have like fully established standards for getting credited. So especially in Brazil, what we do usually after a session is just get a voice memo. So like it's very different from here in the US. When you finish a session, you have like a full demo that it sounds almost as the final record. And in Brazil, we're very like, we want to get the song going, and then we have this voice memo and stuff. And then usually we don't sign split sheets. It's not something that we're like aware of most of the time. So because we're just having a good time and then we're done. And so we have been using split sheets from song camps. We started on that point. But I still believe that there's a lot of misinformation when the information starts running around. There's a part of it that gets lost in translation, almost as if the artist just remembered the name of one songwriter and then he sent to the label, and then the label try to find who is the songwriter. And then I've had circumstances where we get like different percentages, or we're missing out an author, or like they decided to do something else with the song without talking to the author first. And then when they're about to release the song, they have a new part in it, and no one talked to the original artist and the original author. He doesn't even know if there's a new part in it. So I feel like a lot of it, it's also like, of course, lack of information, but also I feel like at one point, when we look back into where the music starts, a lot of people don't realize that this is something that must be respected. So you should always like go back into the original point where the song was born, and ask for the person if you could change the lyrics, if you could add new parts, or what are their full names and everything. But also the last thing, I feel like it's the most important thing, is that as artists, we're usually intimidated but about what it sounds different from our reality. So a lot of times I've talked to my friends and be like, you cannot be intimidated about what's going to be good for you. So like getting more knowledge and being interested in split sheets, or like just talking to people, being on an email with the record label is something important for your own future. And I feel like most of the times artists are just scared of it. It's scared of like not knowing how to handle the situation.
That is a really interesting point, BB, because what you're describing is like, sometimes artists, when they are in their environment and you maybe start talking, oh, let's discuss percentages, it feels like this is a sacrilege. You should not be talking about this here in the studio where we're being creative and stuff. I can totally see that argument, and I think part of what we're trying to do here is try to demystify this a little bit, because as you said, there's nothing wrong with that. Quite to the contrary. As you know, societies, for instance, or publishers, they do not define what the shares are on the work. They do not have that authority, right? They know the share that they have, their agreement with the composer, let's say, in the case of publishers, but they cannot determine that, if there are 3 writers, because people assume, where if there are 4 writers on a song, each one of them gets 25%. And while that's often the case, that's often also not the case, right? There can be different arrangements to that. And that's where usually the problems begin. I want to hear from that perspective from Mugi as well, because you're in the, I mean, you're in the studio most of your life, most of your day, I guess, you know, and you've worked, of course, with numerous artists of all different styles and genres. And do you feel that, since you are based in the US though, right, a different market, do you also feel that resistance there? What's your perception on that?
No, I feel a huge resistance, and I think it's involuntary, obviously. In fact, I am the advisor of the Grammy board, and I am currently trying to enforce the commitment of credits for just about anything. And I mean, I don't need to repeat what Graham and BB said so well, songwriters and, you know, the entity that he runs, and that's well. But there is one aspect that most of the people don't realize, that for me is a super valuable resource of information. When I hear a record and I realize the talent that is on the record, and I could possibly cast to my my current project. In fact, just to illustrate this bit, I'm producing Greg Gaines' album, and the guitar player that we wanted was on tour in Europe. He would not able to be in our session, and we couldn't move the session because like 45 musicians. It was all live, and I found, listening to other records, this one guitar player was a very specific kind of music that we were doing. That guy was awesome, and I could not find who he was. I could not recognize his tone. I could not find who it was. The only way that I could is I had to buy a CD in some sort of a used CD market. By the time they were at my home, my session will be over. So I quite honestly, I was never affected so much of not seeing my personal credit recognized in records. But that one time was the one that really affected me, because now I am deprived of extremely valuable information. So absolutely. I've been very advocate about this, because not only it kind of interrupted my personal creative process, whether wrong or right, it doesn't matter if my call was right or wrong. But not only that, that just stopped that one talent, that one musician, or getting the next gig, which is the only way that they can to promote themselves. So absolutely. They go there, they sweat, they play their heart out. It's beautiful. We all hang and cry and enjoy, and then nobody knows about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect you having a cover of the CD on your press release, have a picture and the name of all the musicians, but there's got to be a way in which every single one is recognized. Fortunately, the songwriting is not the most compromised with that, because usually there's still a lot of gray areas there, but most of the time, I mean, nowadays you see songs that have 25 songwriters, you know.
Yeah. True.
That is someone taking.
How does that even work?
Yeah, and you know, so credits in that sense for me, they are extremely valuable tool that we cannot live without it.
Interesting. I wasn't. It's a good point that you bring, because that it's another additional side to the credits that I hadn't really thought about, but it reminded me of like there is a digital platform that has as one of its selling points, let's say, that they do input as much information about the albums as possible. But the truth is there is this problem we started with, which is getting people to organize the information at the start of the process, which is so important. This is a big part of what we're looking at, and we're gonna go into that a little bit more. But Graham, there's also another part, which is, okay, we kind of have the information together. How does that now flow, right, to the chain? We know that song information will flow to publishers. It will eventually flow to societies. The same thing will happen to the digital platforms, but then usually with the recording information. So we also want these two things connected. There are also a lot of technical aspects to this. If you could give us a bit of insight into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Bibi and Mugi's contributions were spot on, I think, which is talking to, I suppose what we're trying to achieve with the campaign is to raise awareness, talk about the issues and find the solutions. Because I think we all get just how, you know, there's a moral piece to this. You should be, as creators, credited, you should be known, but you should also be paid. And the consumer wants, you know, so there's so many demands for this now, but we're a bit stuck with, I think, processes and information and education that's fallen a bit behind. So, but being positive, I think we can absolutely put in place new processes and tools that could mean that we could gather this information, as you say, Peter, in a more organized way right off the bat. So then you're not having to chase down people, you're not having to call up people. So I think that the key thing to start with is actually, who are the people? Who are the contributors? Who are the creators? So when Bibi and Mugi go into a studio together, they may not know each other's names, proper names, you know, names that are actually, you know, what would be on the registration of the work. And then when we talk about it being registered, obviously it has to sit in UBC or in ASCAP or BMI, or, you know, and this is an international market. The music travels around the world. So actually, who are you should be a standard identifier. Like when you go to an airport, they don't really look at your name, they're looking at the number. It's the passport number. Same if you're social security, or, you know, we need as musicians to get musicians more used to using their standard numbers. So there is a number, it's the IPI for songwriters, there's an IPN for performers, and that's the numbers that the collecting societies and the publishing world use and the record labels use. So if you were to ask lots of the creators on this call, I'm pretty sure many of them wouldn't know that there is an IPI and what their IPI number is. So that's one of the codes. When a work is created, so Bibi and Mugi, they've just come up with a fantastic tune in the studio. It may not be finished, but you've written a song. That song immediately needs a code to anchor the name of the song, who the songwriters are, to the song itself, and that's an international standard work code. So what we need to do is for people to know they need to get one of those codes onto their work as soon as possible. And then generally what we find is that the recording, the record producers, they know they're able to get the standard work code for the recording most times. So when you look at databases, I'd say 90+% of recordings have an ISRC, an international standard recording code, but less than 30% in these databases are showing that there's a standard work code. So to your point, maybe the identifiers are there, but what we don't have at the moment is people knowing that they exist, and they're just really important to getting paid and credited. And then we also need some better processes so that when people are in the studio, and there are bits of technology, Peter, I think UBC are going to be running a testing out session, which is one of the tools that are out there. There's sound credit. There's a number of tools which can help us organize that information in the studio so that when the song is then on its way in the recording, you're not having to go back and try and find the information. The only one thing I'd say is that so long as there's some information on the song attached to the recording, actually the rest of the information can follow later. And that could be song credit, the percentages. So it's not necessary to have all of the percentages agreed in the studio, so long as the song is identified and there's at least a songwriter on there who's identified, because then that can be worked out later.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I always make that point about the percentage, so only because that's where most of the fighting comes later down the road.
Peter, I have one question. Would it be
Of course.
okay? Well, I was actually thinking about, so I work with a lot of like upcoming artists, and sometimes they don't have record deals yet, so they release with digital distributors themselves. And most of the times, the ISRCs are developed by their own distributor, so they don't even go to their association to fully write the credits, and they just get a random number. So what this concerns me a lot for the future, because I feel like it's way easier to distribute music that way, and that's why I've been seeing a lot of people just doing that, not even being concerned enough to go back to their associations to understand what they should do about it, and just getting a random number to upload the song on Spotify. What do you think we should do about this, and what are the following steps? Because if this keeps going on in the future, ISRCs are just going to be random numbers by distributors and not actually accredited code.
You're absolutely right. We have identified that problem in Brazil as well. There are two ways to go about it. I mean, currently, one way we were trying to solve it is that we have started to accept that our members at UBC, when they come to our portal to register a recording, and let's say they already have an ISRC generated by a distributor, they can use that same code, right? And then in the distribution systems, let's say, that code will contain the correct information of the participants in that recording. But still, the ideal way to do it really is that you create your code at your society, or depending on the territory, who is the agency that is responsible to issue the ISRC. Because the ISRC is very interesting code, because differently than from the ISWC that identifies the composition, the ISRC, it has metadata in the code itself, right? So ideally, if it is correct and set up correctly, it will tell you the territory where the recording occurred. It will tell you the year, it will even tell you who is the label, if you, at least it has the code for that label, the FPI code.
Yeah, definitely.
So in an ideal world, it would be so that we only issue it through the agency, the official agency, because we want to have that information clean. But you're right. I mean, this is part of what Graham was saying before, that this is an education process, right? I think everyone that is at this call today needs to understand how deep this issue is, how big it is, how important it is. And we're kind of trying to spread the gospel to this thing, So when UBC decided to partner up with Credits Due, it was because, wow, they actually have a message going on that we already identify with, and we know that it's so important. So we want to be a part of that and bring that to Brazil, to the audience here, So it's a big part of this is education. And the second part is also giving tools. Graham talked a little bit about the session tool. I'll go into that a little bit down the line. But I wanted to have some words from Mugi. Yeah, you were calling. Go ahead, man. You're muted though. You're still muted, Mugi.
I'm back.
There you
So
go.
I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's so illustrating those Zoom calls that we get to learn, always a new thing. But educate is very important. But I think before educating, I think it has to be legislated, because when I first started in business back, and none of you guys were crawling, baby. We had a figure, a person in the studio will be taking notes and making sure that every single element that was involved in that recording was accounted for. And not only that, when it was not used, that was taken out of the credit. So it was a pretty intense job that they had to do. It was not simple. Obviously, considering the amount of recordings that are being cut nowadays, you don't even have enough people, talented people available to take care of all that. I understand that. But the truth of the matter is, you will be surprised how many phone calls I get from my colleagues saying, man, the record that I did is nominated for the Grammy and my name is not there. I said, well, you know,
Wow.
you guys would be surprised how many of those issues happen because the lack of the proper information. Now, the ideal thing is you cannot stream content unless you have such and such and such and such information available. That's the first big battle first. Second one is whoever the carrier and the provider you're talking to, they have to find a way to make that information available.
Yeah.
And by the way, with the amount of music that is, and if we don't take care of the issue and the core of the problem, it will get worse and worse and worse. And I believe me, that will be, it can get to the point they're not even going to see name of songwriters or even producers or anything in the record. I have a funny story because back many years ago, I was a DJ, and I put together the sound system of the club that I worked, and I noticed that for certain records, my sound was much better than the other records. So I was in Rio, in Copacabana, and then I grabbed the record that it sounded so good, and I wrote a letter for them. Remember letter that we used to sit down and write and put a stamp? You know, I did that because I needed to know why that record was so, it was a 45. The only credit they had was the name of the artist and the arranger. That was it. Not even a producer, studio engineer, or anything. And it took a month and a half for the letter to get there in New York, and maybe another month and a half, but they finally replied to me mentioning the name of the engineer, which just happened to be Bruce Swedien, that became famous 40 years later with Thriller. You know,
Wow.
back then already he was a star, at least from my eyes. So it has to be legislated. You have to say you cannot. In Brazil, they're doing very good. In fact, because I do a lot of projects here from Brazil, and the record companies want me to provide as much information. Well, first of all, I am a nut about credits. I do specific credits, very detailed studios, assistant engineers, gophers, restaurants, catering, everything that I can possibly put there.
That's
Of
awesome.
people that contribute to do that creative process. I do that. I'm very avid about that. But somehow that is a Bahama triangle that all this information disappeared and it doesn't get published
Yeah.
because it's not legislated.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about Brazil specifically, and I can't really speak for other territories, especially the US, I'm not sure, but I know that the Brazilian legislation does in theory oblige, you know, users to be providing, especially the name of composers, right? I think looking at it maybe from the side of the platforms, who are now the main vendors of music in this world, they receive a lot of information from the label, but I think on the composition side, it might many times be incomplete. Or they might have names, but they don't have, like, as Graham was saying, they won't have like the identifiers or the ISWC for the song, which then keeps making things difficult. And there also needs to be, I mean, they need to be convinced that this is something that adds value to your platform, and that is actually, I would argue, a differentiator, right? So if you have a platform, if you had a platform where you would go to any given art album or single and you would have all that information in there, I think, and I can only speak for myself, but I would definitely migrate to that platform, right? Because it's
And
something
Peter,
Go
maybe
ahead.
if I could just add to that. So I think that the a complete, I mean, Mui's, hit the nail on the head really in terms of some of this is a big topic. It's got a lot to it. That's where we really do need to, my view is, because I represent creators. I think the more creators understand it's a problem and start to call for that credit information, I think that's a good start. But in the UK, we have been looking at this from a legislative kind of framework. The UK government has been looking at this, and it immediately gets, you could get to a point of saying, actually, should there be a minimum amount of data that's there in order for a recording to be streamed? But immediately everyone gets very worried about that, because they're like, oh, we're going to be holding up a release. And within that process, here's a statistic for you. Spotify said that less than 1% of the recordings they're ingesting have an ISWC.
Wow.
And we did a bit of research last year where we estimated that at the point of streaming, the number of streams that don't have any information on the underlying work, we estimated to be £500 million a year. And we think it's probably double that. So wow. I think to your point, Mugi, about it growing as a problem, if we don't actually kind of get serious about it. And I think that, whilst that's quite negative in terms of the picture I'm painting, I actually think we do have the tools, and there is a bit of momentum building now, I think, to say it doesn't need to be like this. We can capture that information. You're capturing it probably, manually at the moment. This information could be captured in a much more automated way, which would be better for everybody. But in order to affect that, we do need people to kind of get on board with this, say that it's important, ask for change, apply some pressure, because it's different in the different territories. But I think it's possible for us to solve this.
Absolutely. I think, especially these days where everyone is working with a computer, right? I mean, we have apps. I mean, you mentioned sessions before, and tools like these that make it a lot easier to collect that information from the participants, at the beginning, at the start of the process, and also to then send that information, organized and digitally in a file that can be absorbed by the next, step, be it a publisher or a society, right? I think did I talk to UBB about session? Did we discuss it a little bit? I don't remember now.
Yeah, we did.
Cool.
Yeah,
because I'm thinking this is like something that we want to spread the gospel here, right? All of us, I think so. And these types of tools are things that we want to show the audience that they exist, because I think a lot of people still don't know that there is this kind of tool to do that, So what I'm describing is I could be recording something at home, right? And you come in to record your vocals, and I will throw a QR code on the screen, and you would read it with yourself from that app, and automatically all your data, your full name, your date of birth, your identifiers like the IPI and the IPN, all of that would be sucked into the project, right? So right from my Pro Tools, I would have all the information I need from you, and I could continuously do it with everyone that is working on that particular project. When that recording is finished, it can be shared with my label, or even, whatever it is, and be full of that data already, finished, ready to go, with codes that everyone in the chain can read. So to Graham's point, the solutions actually already exist. The identifiers we were talking about exist for a long time. The new technical tools to make them flow also exist. It is really a matter of making people conscious that we need to fight for that, and that they need to be attentive to that when there's in the studio, right? So.
Well, I have to add something about this whole thing that we're talking about here. If you, even the most civilized countries in the world, if you take the sign, don't step over the grass, people will walk over the grass.
Exactly.
Right? We
That's
all know
often the
that.
case.
So
Yeah.
based on that very obvious premise, what it is the other thing that makes it a little more complicated. It's because we have 4 different streams of collaboration, artistic collaboration here. I am from the trenches. I'm in the studio working. I dedicated 99% of my time to whatever it is that we are running there, not only solving the current issues that you have, or contemplating all the rewards and rewarding and what we're doing. So it's very easy for you to forget the housekeeping aspect of the whole process. And
that's why it has to be easy, right?
it has to be easier, but it has to be
for convenience.
I hate any forceful contribution, but it had to be mandatory too. It's not only easy, because it is easy. You grab a pad, and every time you finish a track, you or someone else that you hired, or the record company, someone, to say, listen, in this song here, we had Moogie Graham BB wrote the song with Claudia Brandt, and we had Vinny Colaiuta, and then you list the whole thing. But this is easy. This is the easy part.
Yeah.
But how to make that cross to a final destination is something that is totally out of my control. I can't. And you would be surprised how many times there were artists and talent that were changed in my list to the record company. I don't even know why. I know whoever that person is there felt that, well, maybe I think Moogie made a bad call trying to get, Dave Grusing. Let's put another keyboard player. So what are you talking about? It happens all the time. So
yeah.
the reason why I'm so concerned about legislating, because I can do my work very well about that. But if and you open the door, goes to the neighbor, it's gone.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the commitment that I have.
Yeah, but you also described like a process. The way you just described it, I think is interesting, and it's important because you're describing like making a list of names, right? And what Graham was talking about earlier about identifiers is that names are never enough. We have a big problem because you have a name, and sometimes you don't even have a date of birth, and when you look up that name, let's say in our system, depending on the name, you have 20 different people who have that name, and on the scale that you were talking about, that's why we talk so much about the identifiers, because they are a unique code associated to you. But as you said, when you're doing that process, you probably never have those codes, those identifiers at hand, right? So what we need to do also is facilitate that people do have those identifiers at hand, be it in an app or something like that they can access immediately, that is easy to use, and connect the product.
Whoever is the issuer of that code, because how many Moogie Canazes do you know?
I know. There's only one Moogie Canazo. That's definitely.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is that whoever issues that code, that code is fundamental, and I agree. Whoever issues that code is the entity that you can go in and you type them, listen, Moogie Canazo, boom, the code comes in immediately. Now, what we need to do is to make sure that whoever, is filling up the paperwork goes there and say, oh, hit. I might not even know my identifier, because quite honestly, I don't care. I do care what key I'm cutting the song, and the chorus is not happening too well, and what am I going to do to go through. That's what I care in the studio. I mean, I believe in the need of that, but that has to be someone behind me that goes around and says, listen, the identifier for BB and for Graham and for Peter, and then they do people that have not necessarily any input in the talent of the product, people that do something that is equally important. And I'm diminishing anyone's work. What I'm saying is that if I had to choose 1 hour that I have to evaluate if the performance of my singer is right or to write codes, believe me, I'm going to spend the time with my singer, because that's what I care the most is,
But that, yeah, from that perspective, well, you're right, because you're focusing on the production, right? But exactly like you described, you having the guy in the past who was running around the studio and writing down people's names. That's exactly the part where these days we have the opportunity to offer something that is much easier than that. And that will, in the end, result in a list that is not only digital and transferable to the parties that need to receive it, like publishers and societies, but it already will contain not only the name, but also the identifiers, the role that they play. So these things already exist, right? These are not tools that we need to build. They are being built as we speak. And as this being just our first meeting here about credits due, there will be many others. And there will be others that will actually be focused on these kinds of tools, or at least we'll maybe show them up a little bit.
I
Graham.
have to ask something. Do we have credits for this meeting? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We do. You have
But
all been
if I
properly
could just
credited. Go ahead,
if I could
Chris.
just say a little bit, Mugi, I totally empathize with what you're saying, which is that, and I feel this, I passionately feel this information is either important or it isn't. And if it is, there is a point at which it has to be mandatory in order. Otherwise, we will always be chasing our tail for the players that think it's an effort, I can't be bothered, it's not my job, I've got no incentive, I'll leave it out. And one concern we have is some distributors are actually stripping out information where it exists. I mean, that's even worse. I think the conversation, to your point, Peter, I suppose where we're at the moment is if we can get people really calling for this and saying it's really important, if we can put the tools in place and the policies, I think after that, there's a point at which, and we're seeing this in the industry dialogue in the UK at the moment, that I think the industry are like, well, so long as the information is readily available, if I'm going to be responsible for pulling all this together and pushing it forward, so long as it's available to me, fair enough. Actually, we could move to a point where, I suppose every recording that is streamed has a minimum amount of identifiers on it. That's probably where we want to get to. But I think you've talked about also there's so many parties involved. The managers need to be involved in this. You probably have a manager, or the producers obviously have a very important, distributors have an important, the labels. So it's a really big conversation. But I think if creators are pushing that conversation, I think I'm always an optimist. I think we can make good progress.
Do you think there's anything we could do?
I'm sorry, BB, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Please, BB.
Because I feel for us and for everybody that's listening to our conversation here, I feel like as creators, we kind of are already going on a path where we will be more aware of writing all the credits, crediting everyone, and also whenever we need to talk to a record label to say that, oh, my credit as a songwriter is not on the description of the video on YouTube, could you please add my credit and also add the guitarist and the drummer and the producer and the engineer? So I feel like that it's a collective effort for us to always fight for each other's rights, and that's very, very important. But I also wonder, of course, we need partners in this journey, and I was thinking about which type of effort should we make regarding associations, regarding distributors, to get this thing going a little faster. So I was wondering if maybe would ever be a way for distributors not to be allowed to generate automatic ISRCs in a way that the artist or the distributor would automatically have to generate their own at their association. So could we do that? Could we forbid them from generating that? And also, Peter, do you think in UBC and in Brazil, we could actually eventually stop using our CPFs, which is equivalent to our sociogram, and we could stop using that code and go straight to the CAEs or the IPIs to like actually get this going inside the talk. So like next time next time Universal wants to like register a phonogram with you, you won't accept only the CPFs. You accept the name of the songwriter or the artist alongside with their CAEs or the IPIs, like in a larger scale. How could we do that?
Yeah, well, for your first question, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that can be like prohibited, right? I don't have deep knowledge about how the ISRC regulation works, right? Through the agencies and through IFPI, that could maybe prevent that kind of thing. But for your second question, absolutely. I mean, we use the CAE and the IPI daily a lot for everything, for all our exchanges, and that's the funny thing, is that it is used that much, and yet the composers rarely know about it and know that it exists. So I will actually argue we need the CPF, we need the social security number for Brazil always, and we need that connected to all the other codes that, you know, when we have you registered in our database, we have to have everything, and you have to have everything. That's actually the most important point, because for us, UBC, for instance, if you become a UBC member, you will get assigned a CAE code if you don't already have one. We will do that for you, and we will have it in our database. But the point is, you should have it. You should know it. You should have it written down, or have it on an app on your phone, right? So I think that's a way that we are trying to go, that this is information that is as natural for you as a composer as your CPF would be in your day-to-day life, because in practice, that's exactly how important it is. It's just that people don't know. And if they start to know and start, you know, to get informed about it and keep it, that's already a huge step, you know, because as Graham said, they will start to create awareness of that, and they will ask their friend, oh, what's your CAE? Oh, you don't know what it is? Let me explain. You can do it like that. You can have it on this app or that app. So it will
even now, Peter, if I search somebody's name on UBC platform, I won't get access to their CPF, but I will get access to their CAE. So like if we were to use that identifier as a regular thing on a daily basis to record labels and to everyone else, I feel like probably we would get more information, actually, because most of the times I feel like when we don't get the CPFs in Brazil, at least, we end up using their names, and then it may happen to credit someone else instead. But if we were to use the CAEs, which are available on the platform and everyone can access that, it would be way easier to get rightfully credited.
So I think
go ahead.
If I could just comment on what you said, Bibi. I mean, for me, the credits due conversation and initiative is absolutely about what you're doing, which is starting to problem solve. How can we get this thing moving? How can we move it faster? What do we need to do? And some of that's at policy. Do we need to ask UBC or other PROs to get involved and do something? Is there a policy change with distributors? And my view would be, we can as organizations that are involved in this, go after all of those ideas and see what change we can make. And for instance, in the UK, PRS hasn't opened up its database. So like just you're saying, if you wanted to search for another creator's IPI number or CA, you couldn't get into the database. You know, they're now opening it up on the back of this kind of conversation. So I think that Credits Due has a lot of organizations that have joined up. For instance, you know, there's Sony, you're both based in Los Angeles at the moment. I know Songwriters North America, I know the Recording Academy are looking to get involved. So that there's other writer organizations, as well as lots of collecting societies. I'm speaking to a whole room of collecting societies tomorrow about this. So I think for me, it's exciting to start to go, actually, how could we incentivize people to do the right thing? And then where we need to, you know, make it mandatory, you know, where are the right points to do that? But this is absolutely part of what this is about.
Yeah. I'm actually sorry to say that we are approaching the end of our time.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. Truth is, Mugi, this discussion can take 5, 6, 7 hours. And
Days.
but I want to reassure you, this is like this is just our opener, right? So this is just the first step. We want to keep talking about this. We want to do this through other channels on our you know, that UBC uses as well. We want to have other panels like this with Graham if he's available, of course, in the
Always.
future again. And with you guys, you know, Mugi and Bibi, because you guys represent, you know, you're on at the trenches. You're at the forefront of this. You will have insights as you had today that maybe we don't, you know, because we work on those other ends of everything. So I would really like each of you maybe to, you know, give some parting words about this. And I hope very much to have you know, each of you back again in the future. And yeah, so thank you so much. And please, if you each can give your parting words.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm contemplating here such extraordinary information from Graham and BB because everything is so valuable, and I hope everyone else does too. And the only thing that I have, the only little remark that I want to add about everything that we talked about, there is an entity called RIAA, and that entity many years ago was the one that decided how wide the vinyl was going to be, the speed of the groove, and how big the CD, what sampling rate, and that was determined. And if you wanted to release a CD, you had to be in 44.1 16 bits. There were regulations that were done. You cannot once do in one format, another one, because the end user would not have a way to make intelligent choice of what to do. So it's just like, so why in the middle of this big stream, credits were not part of, if your CD is not this wide, if it is not in 44 1.16, you're not going to be able to release it, because imagine how would it be if every single artist and every single talent decided to do a new creative technical format for his music. It would be impossible for anyone to follow. So the existence of a strong pillar of, okay, if we want this to happen, this is what we all determined that's going to be the format. And somehow there was the abyss in between us in the studio, credits, and the technical aspect of the CD. Yeah. As if the credits were not as important, you know, they are equally important, you know, everything. Right. So that's the only thing that I add. When I hate to be banging a hammer on legislation, but I truly believe that's the only way around, quite honestly.
Thank you, Mugi. That's very insightful. Thank you so much. Bibi?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. I'm honored. And I love talking about this because I feel like everything that we do is not only for ourselves, it's for the greater purpose, it's for the common.
I think you represent a generation of artists that gives me a lot of hope, because you look at your profession as a profession, really, with all the aspects that are part of it, you know. And there are artists sometimes that are very I don't want to deal with that, and sometimes that's fine if they have someone that can take care of it for them, you know. Mm-hmm. But especially when you're just starting out and you don't have anyone to help you, you have to do it yourself, you know. And definitely, and I like that you have that spirit. That's very inspiring. Yeah.
Thanks. And I feel like this is our job. Like, yeah. If you go to a doctor, sometimes he has to study different subjects and different fields that he doesn't really love it. You have that in every job. If you're an architect, there might be a type of thing that you don't like to do, but you have to do it because it's your job. You have to do that. Not always you get to do the fun stuff. So I feel like the fact that we recognize that, I understand that, well, we do the fun stuff, we love what we do, but there's also this tiny part that might not be as fun. I think it's fun, but a lot of people don't think it's fun. We have to do it anyways, because it's just a part of the job. And that's how we get things to go to a better place and for everyone else. So I feel like all the time we're fighting. So in 10 years time, it will be easier for everybody. So I guess it's very
That's
very
all right.
important for us to be doing that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I had a great
Thank
time.
you, Bibi. Graham.
And just to build on it, so thank you so much to Mugi, Bibi, and Peter for getting involved in this. I think for me, it's beautifully encaptured. You know, there's legislative reform that needs to happen. There's a carrot, I think, you know, and there's a stick. And as Bibi was saying, actually, whenever we've had this conversation, we found that creators get it. You know, it's important. They get it. They want to get involved. So just really looking forward to us meeting up again, and also seeing what improvements we kind of made. And you know, I'm sure next time we speak that there will have been some progress. So thanks so much.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Me too.
me too. So thank you guys. This was amazing. Thank you for everyone in the audience. I actually saw a question here that I couldn't answer because it was actually also a little bit out of the scope of our conversation about blockchain. But I have noted it down, and I will get in touch with Monica Mota. I'll get in touch with you to let you know my points on that. And yeah, thank you again, everyone. It was a pleasure. I hope that we can meet as soon as possible again, talk more about it. It was great fun. So bye bye.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Have a great
Até
week.
a próxima. Vejo em breve.
Até a próxima.
Tchau,
Bye
tchau.
bye.
Tchau.
Bye.